are almost in mid-July. Hi, Evan. How are you?
Fine. How are you, Bridget?
Good. I
Lucky
mean,
number
the
three.
time is just yeah, time's flying by, and we were both this week at an open campaign event by the campaign of Jeff Leeper, and we'll talk about that a great deal.
Yes.
Before we get to that, you also attended an event with the Saravana Mutu campaign in Canada North. I want to say yes,
Yes.
Canada North. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes. I called it Mr. Saravanamutu Goes to Canada
Okay.
because when I talked to his campaign manager, Erin, I asked if this was their first campaign event in Canada, and she said it was.
Hmm.
That surprised me somewhat. I thought that Neil had been in Canada in a formal way before,
Hmm.
but I think it is timely for him to appear in Canada as a mayoral candidate. He was at the Beaverbrook Library, so this is the Ottawa Public Library on Campeau Road,
Hmm.
just off
Hmm.
Campeau Road, and I thought it was interesting. I think I'd like to say more about the tone because Neil didn't present us with a slideshow the way Jeff
Right.
did.
Hmm.
And so the tone was of a knowledgeable, serious candidate, and he was a great extemporaneous speaker.
Hmm.
So
He knows his stuff. Like you have to, even if you don't like what he has to propose, you cannot deny that Neil Saravenamutu has done his homework. He knows what he's talking about.
he definitely knows what he's talking
Hmm.
about, and he was very relaxed. He wasn't nervous. His, I mean, sometimes when he's delegated at council and at committees, you sense he's a bit nervous.
Mm.
But I didn't detect any of that this time. And I think there was a crowd, about 25 or 30 people, along with most of his campaign team. He talked about zero-based, I think it was a participatory budgeting, meaningful public engagement, and then he also talked about citizen assembly. So all the things that if you've read his Substack over the last couple of years, these are the things he's talked about. So it's very
Hmm.
consistent.
Right.
So after having seen the Leaper campaign presentation, I see a real contrast between the Leaper campaign and the Saravanamutu campaign. And I would say that the Leaper campaign is a quote unquote values based campaign, and the Neil Saravanamutu campaign is the word that came to my mind was technocratic
Oh, okay.
campaign.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I was wondering how these two campaigns contrast themselves. Because the Leaper campaign, we'll talk a little bit about this.
Hmm.
Now I definitely see a contrast with Mark Sutcliffe. So there's
Right.
no question.
Yeah. He's dropped the gloves.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
dropped the
Yeah. Yeah.
gloves.
Yeah. And
Um,
we'll talk. Yeah.
and we'll
It's
talk about it.
interesting because I would have thought my own impression of Neil is that he's more a little bit, I don't know about technocratic, but he certainly is more technical.
Right.
In the sense that like he knows like this is a finance guy, like
Yeah,
he's the
yeah,
budget guy. He
yeah.
understands the nuts and bolts and of how things work, and he's been involved with the city, as you were saying, with attending and participating in meetings and so on. So I would think of him more like that, but so is Jeff Leeper, right? Like I was struck, and to me, there I am being me. The one word that really stuck out to me last night in the open campaign presentation that they had was that they considered Jeff Leeper to be adorkable.
Yes.
I
So
just love that word. It's a great new word, and I'm going to use it because Jeff is dorky. And I mean that in the most loving way. Like he's a dork.
yeah,
He does care, and he's a nerd, and he loves the details and the processes and the formulas and all that kind of stuff. Like you want a striking committee, he's your guy, right?
nice.
Um,
So we have two. Yeah, you could almost say. So when I say technocratic, I mean policy wonk.
hmm.
And so it's interesting. So how do you contrast two policy wonks? And the way I see the contrast, that's why I said Neil was technocratic. It's because he leads with the policy. You don't get a sense that Neil is the touchy feely, whereas
Mm,
Jeff, he meets you at he has his listening tour at pubs. This is
hmm.
not where you would think that Neil would have his outreach events. And so, and even there was that slide in in the Jeff campaign presentation last night, which talked about, you know, telling Jeff's volunteers when they go to the door and canvass, and this was, you know, how do you persuade people at the door? It was lead with emotion.
Mm,
Don't lead with policy, lead with
hmm.
emotion. And I don't think I can't see Neil leading with emotion. I think he wants to lead with policy. So that's so
Yeah.
maybe we're seeing a nuance. We're seeing two policy people, but there are nuances in how they are approaching their campaigns.
With one exception that I'm going to point out, and maybe it's, I don't know. I'm not saying I'm contradicting you on this one, but the part of Neil's campaign about being open, having the books be open, and
Yes.
100 years to open
Yep.
up all the books, I think this speaks to emotion as well, because a lot of people in Ottawa, and maybe it's me projecting, but I don't think so. I think this is a fairly widespread sentiment in this town, is that we don't really know what's going on. Like, think of the library at Isoke, the new one, right? We can't even know why things are delayed. Um, we don't really know what's going on. Decisions appear to be made regardless of whatever we say in public consultations. It feels like by the time we get to consultations, decisions already been made. That's the way a
Yes.
lot of us feel. So that undertone of like, we're sick of the secrecy, and the
Yes.
club that's
Yes.
governing the city that does not include the rest of us. I think Neil speaks to that without using those words. I
Yes.
think he speaks to that emotion very much when he talks about an open campaign and opening the books.
That's a good point. I agree with you. I would say now getting a better sense of the policy proposals in their respective campaigns, I don't see how Neil and Jeff would fundamentally disagree with each other.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, I listened to Neil and everything he said would strike most people as reasonable. Open books, Jeff talking about starting the budget process earlier in the year in
Hmm.
April. Yes. Both candidates talk about having more meaningful public engagement.
Yes.
Yes. So there's not a
It,
lot of
yeah.
daylight in
And
terms of
telling you
policy.
what your tax dollars go
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
right? So both camps, they don't use the same formulation, but
Yes.
the very strong feeling I have is that we're not promising tax cuts, we're not promising to keep taxes the way they are, but we're promising that we're going to tell you what the taxes that you pay are for.
Yeah.
And with a better consultation process, and again, the devil's going to be in the details on that one, but if they really actually do mean to listen to people, then there's a bit of a feedback mechanisms. And I think people are okay to pay for things that need paying for.
Yes.
That's what living in a democracy is like. But if we have a good sense that we're getting value for the tax dollars that we send to City Hall, most people, I think, will be at least feeling better about it, because you know what your tax dollars are for.
Yeah, both candidates talk about the importance of transparency.
Yeah. I don't see Mark Sutcliffe talking about that.
I don't see
Did
him
I miss it?
ever talking about that.
Yeah. Alex Lawson also, by the way, must be on vacation this week or something, 'cause I haven't seen a thing from him, or maybe my algorithms are weirded out these days, but I have not seen anything from and fair enough. He gets to take vacation if he wants to. It's a good time for that.
Yeah,
But
I think
he also, yeah.
if
Mhm.
you look at his website, you know, I was surprised when you go to the events section that
There's
you
nothing.
don't
Yeah.
see
Mhm.
any public events listed.
Well, there was one for May, but
One
that's,
for
yeah.
me.
Yeah, and we're in July anyway, so we'll see about that. Maybe they're listening, and then they will go and update their website. It would be nice. I did, because I really did like the one thing. I want to give the campaign, Jeff Leaper's campaign, a lot of credit, and I don't know whose idea it was, but whoever it was, good job to have an open event. I signed up for it. They know who I am. And I was allowed to go in there. You were in there. I hope there were people from the other campaigns in there as well.
I think
And
Mark
they were
Sutcliffe.
pretty yeah, they must have had people there. And it was very transparent. Here's the number of volunteers we have. Here's the amount of money we've raised. Their average financial contribution is $135, I believe it says.
Yes.
I have it somewhere, which means like reasonably smallish donations. Like, these are not big, big donors. Um, what we're saying at the door, what our strategy is. how we're doing, and then they answered questions about like where's the campaign now relative to where Catherine McKinney's
Yeah, I was
campaign was
surprised.
4 years ago.
I
They
was
were pretty
surprised.
open with all this information.
I mean, you heard Stephen Yardy, his campaign manager, say outright that they are four times. Was it
And ahead
by a
or
factor of four? They're ahead
right.
of where
Hmm.
Catherine McKinney was at this time. I suppose July 2022 in
Hmm.
her
As
campaign.
far as volunteers and
That's right.
being having identified their voters
Yes.
and so on and so which is how you win elections. By the way, like elections, I know I hate to be this basic, but elections are won by people going to vote for you. And you have to make sure that they do actually go out and vote for you. So that's a huge part of the equation. You have to not only convince them to vote for you, but then make sure they do actually go out and do that. So it's anyway, they seemed, again, the same thing that I think I said that last week. I feel a lot of confidence from the Leaper campaign.
Yes, they are project. They're definitely
Yeah.
projecting a lot of
Are they great
confidence.
actors? I don't know. Are they
No,
bluffing? I don't
but
know. We'll find out. But
so
I'm sensing that
okay.
confidence very
So
much.
I picked up the note or the fact that they gave us that they have 400 volunteers.
Hmm.
Still think that that's low. I think they should have had 400 volunteers, 2 months ago,
Hmm.
personally.
Hmm.
I think by September they need to have, and I'll say the number, they need 3,000 volunteers. They need to have 3,000 volunteers and to be competitive with Mark Sutcliffe and basically to counterbalance his control of call it the local attention economy, right, as mayor.
Well, you see the media. Well, of course,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's the advantage of the incumbent is
Yeah.
that you're the mayor, so
So,
people
so
listen to
I
you.
think
When
they definitely, from a campaign organization perspective, they felt good about having 400, but I think it'll have to be a multiple.
I
Um,
wonder how many volunteers Mark Sutcliffe has, and relative to 4 years ago, that would be interesting to
that would
know.
be interesting.
If they want to tell us, I'll be listening
Right.
and we can talk about it. I did also, I was struck in the meeting yesterday. And again, like really cool idea to be open about what your strategy is and to everyone. And just, again, it feels, it's refresh. I like that. I've covered a lot of campaigns. I've never seen this before.
Good.
And I like it very much. They are very clear in telling again, the Leaper campaign, telling their volunteers, let's not go negative. Like we're contrasting with Mark Sutcliffe. We think he's on the wrong track. We think, what's the word he used? Reckless? Is that the word that he used?
Right track, wrong track.
Uh,
Right.
I think at some point Leaper said, sorry, no, I don't want to misquote him, but I believe he did say something along the lines of, we think this is, reckless. I'll correct myself. I'll correct if I got this wrong, but a city that works is a positive message. That's also a negative message, right? Because like the part that's unsaid is compared to the other guy who's not working, but you don't have to say that one, and to also make sure that you never go out and say that Mark Sutcliffe it doesn't work hard or whatever. Like there are
So,
things you
so,
just don't need to say because
so,
nobody's going to go out and say that he's evil or lazy or whatever. Like it's just we don't think the city is working under his administration, and we have a plan to make it work for you. That's essential. That's what I got from the gist of their campaign
so
message.
this is where you get greater clarity on what Jeff Leeper means by a positive campaign.
Hmm.
So now you are seeing the contrast where they popped up that slide, the contrast slide with Mark Sutcliffe, and then they told the supporters on the call, but this doesn't mean you make it personal.
Hmm.
So we don't expect you to go up to the door and start referring to the mayor as lazy.
Right.
So
Or
avoid the
bad or
personal. So
yeah.
don't make it a personal attack, but show the contrast between a city that works and a city that doesn't.
Right.
Between
Which makes sense because
yeah,
that's what interests voters, right? They don't care about, whether the guy gets up at 5 to go running or not. Like that's not relevant to them. Is their life better because
yes,
of this person in the job of mayor or not as good as it used to be or not as good as it could be? So that's essentially your ballot question right now.
right.
And that's when you talk about a change election, whether this is, and I don't know that this is a change election at this point, right? The way you framed it last week was either it's a status quo election. People are happy enough with Mark Sutcliffe or not unhappy enough to not vote for this again.
Correct.
I like my double negative,
Yeah.
but I think it matters a lot. Or do they feel like, you know what, this could be better? And I trust this other guy, presumably Leaper, because Sarah Vanamatu is not picking up in the polls right now, and his name recognition is just not there. Do we trust that Leaper can make this better?
Yes.
That essentially is going to be your question.
So, and if the polling shows that Mark Sutcliffe is is 50% and above among decided voters, then I guess you would call it a status quo campaign because that's
Hmm.
what Ottawa seems to want.
Right.
But if you look at the Leaper numbers, it, you know, their change campaign, in their own minds, is working. But I think we should look at that 43.67% number.
Yeah. Yeah.
Typically, when you get internal polling, knock off 4 to 5 points. So
Hmm.
if it's 43%, in the most optimistic scenario, Jeff Leaper, and we'll see what Liaison Strategies says in their next poll. The most optimistic number is probably in the high 30s, 38 or 39. Jeff Leaper's baseline, so his floor, is 30%,
Hmm.
and his ceiling in a four-way race is probably 40. Right? That's the spread we're talking about. So when Chorus, the polling firm, came out this week with 50, the mayor has 54%
Hmm.
of decided voters. A lot of people had question marks around that, even with with a sample of 400, which means a margin of error of I think 4.3% or so. But so if you look at the difference, I think there is a 10% spread, right? And probably the mayor is sitting at 42% right now, and Jeff Leaper is probably in the high 30s. So I don't think Jeff Leaper is leading the mayor in July.
Hmm.
He may lead the mayor in September, but I don't think
Yeah.
he's leading the mayor in
But
July.
this, I'm going to get back with the Pierre Poilievre lessons for politics. Don't peak too early, because it doesn't matter if you peak when people aren't voting.
That's right.
Hmm. So this is good. I was also struck, and now I forget the exact number. I have it somewhere, but they have the Leaper campaign, and they seem pleased with that too. And I think that's a good sign for any, for politics in general, that there's a strong proportion of their volunteers and donors who are first timers who'd
Yes.
never volunteered before and never contributed or no, maybe $5 here and there, but like they never really gave to a political campaign who are now giving to Jeff Leaper. And I like that because we always need more. Like municipal elections, the participation rate is typically, in the basement. This is the lowest
Yeah.
participation rates of all the elections that
But
we
but
have.
not but
So
not Bridget, not in Ottawa. 43% in
I,
2022 is it
yeah,
was
but it's
high.
still low.
Well,
It's
but
still
but high
low.
for municipal elections in
I
Ontario.
know. I know. Ottawa's a city of little political nerds, which is great.
Right.
But we could do better than
We could.
43, right? Even if it's better than the rest of the province, I think that's not, I don't want that to be my standard. So I'm just speaking for myself. I don't want that to be the standard. I want us to get higher
But
numbers than that. So this is encouraging.
yeah, we're much
That's what I
higher than
got from that.
Toronto. Our
Good. We're beat
participation.
Toronto.
Yeah, we're
Awesome.
beating Toronto on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good. It's good to see that more people are getting interested. And, I hope they're young. And I hope that this is not their first and only time that they're interested. I really do
Well,
hope that this
that
gives them a bit of a bug, or because municipal elections, this is the level of government that's closest to you.
Yeah, so this is my
It
bugbear.
matters.
This is my bugbear, as you know, about whether the Leaper campaign can access those 40,000, irregular voters, and
The
including
X
that
factor, you would call it.
your
Yeah.
kids are
Mhm. My
included in
kids,
that.
yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm, you know what? And I got some comments online about like, who cares about your kids? And it's not about that. It's just, I think it's important, and of course I'm not telling my kids who to vote for, but I'm clearly making sure they do get to the polling station because I care that they should have their voices heard, whatever they want to say. But it does matter that young people be interested in this because I mean we've been screwing it up quite a bit over the last while. So maybe the kids can save us and force us to be a little bit more accountable. And I do see, and Jeff Leaper is not a is about, I think he's about my age, right? So he's an older guy. But I do see the influence of a younger kind of generation and how open and positive the vibe of his campaign, and of course his campaign is run by younger people. Um, I do like that vibe, and I think there's a lot of younger millennial influence in there. But let's just be open. Let's talk to people of all things, right? I
Well,
like that.
what'll be interesting to see is where Horizon Ottawa, which has a
Hmm.
lot of a younger membership, where whether Horizon Ottawa will endorse the Leaper campaign, or which campaign that
Right.
Horizon will endorse, or whether they will not endorse any campaign.
Hmm.
And so they have a lot of capacity. As you know, they run issue campaigns. They're regularly
Hmm.
canvassing, not canvassing in terms of election canvassing, but advocacy canvassing, knocking on doors. So it'll be interesting to see where Horizon Ottawa fits into this electoral equation.
Hmm. So I have not had anybody knock on my door recently for any campaign. Have you had any other people? Did you get
Not since
leaflets,
not.
flyers, something?
I definitely haven't seen any sign of Alex Lawson. I've received a flyer from Neil, and I've spoken to a canvasser from the Leaper campaign.
Hmm.
I've talked to my contacts out in the eastern and southern outer suburbs, and they have not seen any sign of Alex Lawson. That doesn't mean he hasn't been out there; it just means that they haven't felt
Hmm.
his presence.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm still going to be hoping to go on a little canvas. I'll be out of town next week, so I'm waiting until I'm back, and then I'll get in touch with the other campaigns and see perhaps in August go and follow along and see how people are reacting. I was interested last night in there were what 90 odd 92 people I think is
Yes.
the highest number I saw on the Leaper meeting on the Zoom call last night. Possibly probably about 20 were like working on the campaign. And then a couple of us, we don't really count in the sense that
That's right.
we're
Observers.
unusually
We're
interested
observers.
observers. So there was, I don't know if that's a large number of people or not, but I did like that they were engaged, were asking questions, they were commenting, and it was a lively enough meeting, and I did enjoy that. And I'm again encouraged. It's not like me to be so encouraged and positive, but dang it, I did like the vibe of that meeting, not just from the campaign, but from the people attending. And there's I think again, I may be having my rose colored glasses, but I am sensing a desire to participate that I love very much. And I want more of it. So please keep this up.
Well, as you know, I'm interested in the internal campaign machinery. So
Hmm.
I was very pleased to hear and see who the people are, who's behind the campaign. And Aaron Morrison, I guess, is their senior communications advisor, and they have a director of communications. And you start to see all the players. And I would say, and I think somebody made a comment on one of my columns recently, and they said, "Why do you keep on highlighting Stephen Yardy? Why don't you
Hmm.
talk about the other campaign managers?" Well, I'm not sure. Well, first of all, I'm not sure
I'm
who
not
the.
too sure who they are.
Well, we know that there is that Neil Saravana-Mutu's campaign manager is Aaron, and we know Emery's. I can't forget how to pronounce his name
Emrys,
properly.
I believe. Yeah. Sorry, guys, buddy,
Sorry,
if we
guys.
got it wrong, but I
Is
think it's
is
Emrys. Yeah, or Emrys.
Emery's, yeah. So
Hmm.
he is Alex Lawson's campaign manager.
Hmm.
I don't know whether Mark Sutcliffe has appointed or publicly stated who his campaign manager is. But the reason I focus on Stephen Yardy in my columns is simply put that I think he's the major non-candidate player in this election because he is the person managing the Leaper machinery, the organization. And if Leaper is to unseat a sitting mayor, I think a lot of that will be due to the organizational acumen and effort of Stephen Yardy. So that's why I talk about him a lot in my columns.
Hmm. Hmm. All right then. So what else are we looking? Oh yes, I wanted to briefly touched on. I sat to listen to a committee meeting over the renovation business, and
Yes.
there were a lot of interventions. It went on for 5 and almost 6 hours, so I didn't listen to the whole thing, but it passed, so that's a good thing. And I was surprised by how limited the city is, given that municipalities are creatures of the provinces, and the provincial regulations and legislation do govern a lot of that. And the city of Ottawa is limited in what it can do to prevent bad faith renovictions. But it looks like what was passed this week, or was agreed to this week, is probably the best of what we can do. So that's good, and it feels like most people voted in favor of that, except for one.
Except for one. So I I took note of that, and
Hmm.
the minute I saw who it was Councillor Lowe. I don't know why the word maverick came into my head, but that's just because I last year I wrote a column about him as a councillor, and I guess my sense was that this person had an independent streak in him and was
Mm.
kind of a maverick. So when I saw that he was the lone councillor that dissented, the word maverick came into my head. Then I looked up and to see why he dissented, and his answer was, or his rationale was that the province already dealt with issues of
Mm.
bad faith
Right.
landlords, and I believe, and I wasn't following the issue that as closely as you, Brigitte, but I think it was the issue of forcing, compelling landlords to have a permit in hand before they proceed with the N13,
Hmm.
which is the application to involuntarily evict a tenant if you intend to
Renovate
create
for necessary
renovations. Yeah,
renovations. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
I'm a belt and suspenders kind of person when it comes to that. So I would say that feels like a flimsy, weird excuse to me. I mean, whatever, that's his decision and he will be judged on it. But yeah, I think that even if the province has already dealt with this, we still have problems. And in fact, there were some people who testified at that committee on what day was it? Wednesday, including one person who had to be hospitalized for suicidal thoughts at some point over the stress and extraordinary, hardship it was, that this person had to face. I'm just not going to identify them, but even though it was a public meeting, there's probably enough attention as it is. But this has a real human cost. This is a person who lives on fixed income and low income at that, and had no options. And it's not just that you have no option, it's just you cannot find another place to live. There's so many people who are not very many steps removed from the street.
yes.
And not to say that landlords cannot manage their properties, they do have rights as well. Like everybody understands that. But yeah, belt and suspenders on this one, I think, is given the human cost to people who don't have a lot of options, I'm okay with.
Well, this, as you know, affordable housing was a major in the municipal issue set
Mhm.
was a major concern, and if somebody on a fixed income is living in a house that is based on market rents, and then is issued an N13 involuntary eviction, and realizes they cannot afford any market rent. So they've been living at below market rent because they're
That's right.
typically a long-term tenant.
That's right. Hmm.
The landlord has only been able to increase their rent, usually below inflation, so 1.8 to 2.5% per year. It doesn't cover the
The
increases in
upkeep, the
utilities,
maintenance, and the
and
yeah,
so
insurance and
the
everything.
insurance.
Yeah,
So the landlords realizes that they are losing money, and the only way that they can hope to recoup their investment is to do major renovations, and that's the tension, because the
yeah,
tenant does not have an affordable housing solution.
that's right.
They then have to go out into the private marketplace where the current rents, they're unable to pay those current rents.
It's more than their entire income
It's
in some
more than their
cases, right?
entire
So
income.
you literally cannot do this. And I wanted to just put in a word because I'm also very sympathetic to not the big corporate landlords and the real estate investment. What is it? The REITs, the
Yes,
real estate investment trusts or whatever
trust.
they are,
Yes,
and big retirement pension plans and stuff that buy apartment buildings. I'm sympathetic to the small landlord, the person who has a small, like 2 or 4 units somewhere, or they rent, they have just a secondary home that they rent. They also have issues, as you were just pointing out, that their costs increase and then they don't make any money on their rental housing. And so they don't know what to do. So there are some issues for them too. And I'm not saying that they should bear all the costs. So I think the province could do a lot better on this, as so many other things. I'm not a fan of this provincial government. Um, and I think we need to get better organized. But you cannot make the poorest and the most vulnerable pay the bulk of the costs of this issue.
Yeah, it's a
And
very
I think
difficult
Ottawa
issue,
yeah, I think we're striking a good balance with
and
this renovation bylaw.
it raises the issue of affordable housing and
Exactly.
public
Yeah.
housing.
Hmm. They're not the same.
So that the
Yeah.
most vulnerable members of society do not have to face market rents that they cannot possibly
Hmm.
afford. And then there's a choice when they, to literally be out on the street or to be couch surfing or to be renting rooms. It's undignified.
That's right.
It's a measure of our society, how we treat the most vulnerable people in our society, which I should say was a comment from one of the participants at Neil Saravan-Mutu's meeting. He
Hmm.
gave a long, almost a quasi speech about a society and a city is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable citizens.
Right.
And so that should be something for the campaigns to consider.
Yeah, and I hope they do. All right, so we'll keep watching things. I
Keep-
will be talking to you next week from a as yet undisclosed location. You'll see. I have a surprise for you. And yeah, have a lovely weekend and enjoy. I hope you weren't woken up last night by the Canada Day extra fireworks that they decided to fire off to get rid of the shells. Did you see that
Oh, I
story?
heard that, and I was wondering what that
11
was.
p.m. on a weeknight without warning. They decided because apparently it was the safest way to dispose of the surplus fireworks from Canada Day, which fine, I guess. Tell us maybe, or do that a little earlier because 11 p.m. is a
Is
bit
this
late for
is this
people to
part
be
of this?
woken up.
Is this the frustration that the Saravanamutu and Leaper campaigns express about the city's public communication function when it
Yeah,
deals
there
with
was no
floods,
communications at all.
fireworks?
Yeah, nothing, not a word. And counselors who are getting the brunt of people like, what the hell, right? And they're like, I didn't know. I got woken up like this, like you did. So clearly, breakdown in communications, or perhaps just I don't know, have some comms. People want to know, yeah, and not
Okay.
be woken up by explosions they didn't know were coming at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. I know it's basic stuff, but
It's basic.
all
Exactly.
right.
Basic stuff.
So don't do that again.
On that note, I
Okay.
wish you all the best to
All
your
right.
undisclosed location. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
we'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Okay, bye.